So for some creative inspiration, please welcome Reid Nakou.
All right, good afternoon. Lucky last. 40 minutes till we can have a drink, although I feel like we could have a drink right now because this is going to be really fun and inspiring, and I'm very happy to be here, so thank you to the Property Council for having me. My name is Reid, I'm the CXO at the G Store, and we work with retailers and property owners around the world, crafting next generation environments, experiences across flagship store concepts through to master planned developments, precincts, and shopping centers. And one of our favorite clients, top right-hand side, obviously Rebel Sport here in New Zealand, and Briscoe's Group, which are opening their first flagship, or new flagship, just down the road in Mount Wellington in a few weeks' time. And what a great topic, retail's next chapter. I feel what great permission to talk about global retail innovation and showcase the things that we're seeing around the world, what we love, what we can learn from them. And I think on that note, as Nadine mentioned, every year we put together a report exclusively for the World Retail Congress where we profile the top 50 world's coolest retailers. That is followed by a keynote where we showcase the top 10, which I'm going to give you a super abridged version of here today. So, without further ado, let's jump into some housekeeping before we delve into that. First and foremost, some rules around, well, why does cool count? Right? I think simply put, and this was touched on earlier in the day, it holds a really vivid mirror up to culture and customer, often reflecting the values, the wants, the needs, the desires of today's consumer. I think it's really, really important for us to remember that. Secondly, and perhaps most importantly, I'd encourage us all to hunt for the strategic underpinnings of these ventures. We always say, let's read between the lines. There's reasons why these brands are doing what they're doing. And I think just scribe them as we go through the motions, and I'll share my views as to what those are at the end. And last but not least, was obviously it's giving us a view as to what the future holds, not just for the industry, but for categories and sectors more specifically, and we'll touch on a number of those today. Secondly, how do we quantify cool? Such a subjective term. What is the criteria around how we measure that? It goes without saying these ventures, brands, experiences have to be creative, they have to have X factor, they have to have a level of newness and intellectual bravery is the way we like to put it. They have to have a cult following. We think if this is a great symbol of how brands are actually taken by the communities that they serve. And last but not least, we say we're not here to judge art projects. These are high-performing commercial ventures at the end of the day that are doing very well and are successful businesses. So, thought we'd structure a bit like a countdown and have a little bit of fun with it, hence why I thought we could bring the drinks in early. But coming in at number 10, I want to talk about sleep health. The new rock and roll. Everyone's talking about sleep health. Everybody wants a part of it. It's one of the fastest growing verticals of the multi-trillion-dollar wellness economy, and it's actually estimated that 63% of the global population live with and experience poor sleeping habits, which is pretty alarming given it's such a cornerstone of our emotional, physical, cognitive well-being. This is a brand called Sleepacy. It's actually a subsidiary of the Swedish iconic bed retailer Jensen Beds, and they've created this brand to build a whole proposition around sleep health beyond bedding Manchester. So it actually focuses on accessories, sleep aids, fragrances, apparel, teas, actually sleep coaching, and not just sleep coaching for anyone, for the Swedish Olympic team. Their first flagship store in Stockholm, they talk about it's a global first in kind of sleep health concept stores, beautifully curated, beautifully merchandised, feels a bit like a bedroom retreat, absolutely gorgeous in the way that it's kind of curated. It's about 300 square meters, this particular store. My favorite part, however, is that they've recognized the complex and I guess highly consultative or educative nature of the category, right? It's actually very scientific, and they've really leaned into how service then lives in the store. The fact that you can sit in that bottom left-hand corner dining room setting, have a Sleepacy tea and talk about your sleep needs with a sleep consultant. It's just so well thought out, and I guess service being at the core of it. So just a really great example as to what we might see moving forward in the wellness economy, particularly around sleep. All right, number 9. I think this is probably the world's coolest community. This is a brand called Kith. Can I get a show of hands? Who's heard of Kith before? Oh, awesome. Okay. So Kith started as a bespoke kind of sneaker retailer and has since blossomed into, I would say, the ultimate mecca of streetwear and fashion. Founded by Ronnie Feig in the top right-hand side. When Jerry Seinfeld became their ambassador and almost broke the internet a couple years ago, they are called the king of collabs. And I think, again, collaborations being a key, I guess, piece of symbolism around how a brand has been taken to by culture, from Tommy Hilfiger to Sesame Street to the New York Knicks to Asics and to cereal brands. I'll talk about cereal in a moment. The best part about Kith is their stores are absolutely mind-blowing. As an architect, I froth over these stores. There's about 14 flagships around the world, but they're created as destinations. I think we've spoken a lot about that today. I think the other thing that they do really well is they democratize the premium experiences, often, I guess, withheld for, five-figure price tag luxury experiences. So the fact that you can actually come into the space and walk out with a T-shirt for $70, I think is really, really interesting. They also, in terms of building a community, they'll have restaurants in their stores called Zedell's. It's like a modern take on the American diner. Hundreds of seats in terms of scale, often on rooftops of buildings. And then they have a dessert bar, which they call Kith Treats. Again, this is actually born from the founder's obsession with cereal. And it's basically an ice cream bar. And you can customize toppings all through favorite cereals. You can see LeBron James there enjoying his Kith ice cream. But again, just building this amazing community that started with sneakers and I think just has ventured into an amazing lifestyle destination. All right, number 8, the youthful disruption of a legacy-rich category. What do you mean by that? It's actually expected that the second-hand watch economy is going to exceed that of its older brother, the luxury watch market, by 2030 and exceed $50 billion. And this is the story of a brand called Kettle Kids, which is based in London. And it was started by two young brothers, Jacob and Harvey Hudson, who I had the pleasure of meeting in London earlier this year. They're 27, 28 years old. And they started trading watches on social media not too long ago with a £1,000 loan from their mum. The brand has since, I guess, exploded into a home for the rarest and most expensive timepieces in the world, some of which exceed £500,000 in value. They've since then ventured into diamonds and gold jewelry, and it's highly sought after by athletes and kind of celebrities around the globe. Their first store, actually only one store at this stage, is in Mayfair in London in Old Bond Street. For those familiar with London will know Old Bond Street is one of the most iconic luxury destinations in the world. My favorite actually part of this whole store is that Fiat that is parked outside the front door. That Fiat gets 2 parking tickets every single day. It never gets towed and has become this Instagram sensation, and they call that their main marketing budget. It's just, again, the talkability, the moments of magic, and the brand breadcrumbs, as we like to call it, that really stand out, the little 1%ers. Stepping foot inside the store, it's designed like a vault. Everything is under lock, glass and key. Feels a little bit like what Tiffany's used to be. There's wine lounges, there's, wine cellar, private lounges. All the fixtures are designed to kind of reflect the geometry of watchmaking. It's absolutely beautiful. They've actually just announced they're opening their second flagship called the Townhouse. They're at 4,000 square meters. And look at who they're sitting next to. Vacheron and Rolex. Talk about disruptors. These are children. Late 20s and doing stuff like this, I just think is absolutely mind-blowing and, again, touches on the second-hand economy being something so prolific I think we should all take note of. All right, number 7. The ultimate luxury ecosystem. This is Restoration Hardware, which is now recently been rebranded as RH. Anyone familiar with RH, Restoration Hardware? Awesome. I think the best thing about Restoration Hardware, it's a luxury furniture brand, by the way. Gary Friedman, the CEO, says, I just think is so telling about how the business is kind of structured. We're about climbing the luxury mountain. We're not here to win in luxury furniture. We're here to conquer the entire luxury world. Furniture is just our vehicle to do that. I just love putting this on a board and having a moment. This is a furniture brand. Building penthouses and guest houses and hotels on the top left-hand side in Soho in New York, occupying these old, often dilapidated palaces on the outskirts of London. They now have jets, they now have Michelin star restaurants, and now have ventured into yachts. It's all about creating this world of RH. Of course, their stores are absolutely world-class as well. They have about 70 in the world. They call them galleries, and they're absolute architectural masterpieces. It's all about curation. It's all about, again, being part of this world. But I think what's most interesting for me is how they think about loyalty. I think so 95% of the company's $600 million in revenue comes from their members. It's about $300 a year to join, so relatively accessible. Gives you consistent discounts, free interior design services, access to concerts. Again, just building this world is just so powerful, and I think is the best part about what Restoration Hardware do. All right, number 6. Let's talk about sustainability for a moment. This is a brand called Harper Collective. Bless you. It's actually estimated that we, as a global population, produce 350 million metric tons of plastic each year. 1% of that ends up in our oceans. That's absolutely alarming and horrifying. And Harper Collective is a luggage brand built out of recycled ocean plastics. I think, interestingly, it was started by Jaden Smith. Many of us who will know as Will Smith's son, very well-known creative entrepreneur, and Sebastian Maines, who is the ex-director of merchandising at Selfridges. And they've created this amazing brand, the positioning of it, as you can see, very runway, very high fashion, price point around $1,000 a unit. The term collective comes from their brand partnerships, and you know, Barbour being one of them, one of the most iconic British textile companies and apparel brands that hand-stitch all the inner linings of the product. Every product comes with a blockchain, digitally enabled passport where actually customers can understand the composition of the materiality and basically the product origins. They've just then also recently announced that they are opening a store in the metaverse. Now, I'm not particularly one for metaverse. I'm a bit vintage in that regard, but I think what we love about this is that it's given them permission to tell really compelling stories about the brand and about sustainability. And I think the mediums that they're telling these stories in are actually you know, great for the customer to actually access. You can access it off their website as well, which I just think is brilliant. But again, just a really interesting play for a luggage brand to be venturing into the kind of this world. All right, number 5, skate culture. One of the hottest things happening in the world right now. And this is a brand called Palace Skateboards. Again, born on the streets of South London, started as a skate gang. Palace Wayward Boys Choir is what they called themselves, making tapes on VHS, designing merchandise for their skate crew, and they were actually inspired a lot by 90s pop culture. Their merchandise got so much attention and got picked up by a foundational partner from a brand many will know of, Supreme. That then ventured into Gucci, Ralph Lauren, the Tate Modern, which you can see some of those artistic pieces there, as well as Adidas. This is a skate brand. I just keep coming back to this, a skate brand. Look at how they're kind of speaking of themselves as a brand. The other thing that we like about Palace is this sense of culture clash and the unexpected. What do you think their stores look like? They are gorgeous. Imagine when I was a kid and skating, you're shopping for a skateboard in a marble travertine-clad environment. Never, right? These are absolutely beautiful spaces. The bottom right-hand side is one of their latest flagships in Seoul. They close their stores on a quarterly basis to change the whole interior for various collections. But again, this whole democratization of luxury and premium experiences, where you can buy a t-shirt for $100 or a skateboard for 10 grand, which is one of the Tate Modern exclusives, I just think is really interesting. In fact, if I didn't tell you where that bottom right-hand image was, you'd mistaken it for a Moncler store. Okay, number 4. From documenting culture to defining it. This is the story of Hypebeast. Show of hands who's familiar with Hypebeast. This started as an independent fashion blog and is now a $1 billion publicly listed company on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. So again, a fashion blog, a fashion blog born out of a university dorm room, talking about exclusive product launches, collaborations. The business was so successful, it's now ventured into a number of supporting verticals. Hype Bay, which is absolutely massive. It's a destination for female fashion, art, maps, tour guides for cities with the best retail and brands to visit and see. Hype Golf, it was born in Hong Kong. Golf is a huge part of that culture. Hype Maker, which is an in-house creative production agency. And last but not least, HBX, which is an e-commerce platform. You know, they found they're curating all these beautiful products. Why not sell them? HBX became so successful, they started opening stores. They have 2 in the world, one in Tokyo, one in New York. And it's a home to kind of curate these beautiful collections and bring their community together for the very first time in a tangible way. Speaking of community, they've since ventured into markets and activations and events. This is what they call Hype Beast Flea. They're on an annual basis. They move around the world. Tens of thousands of people show up at these events. They exhibit new, like up-and-coming retailers, brands, designers, and it's just basically a two-day party. So again, I just come back to fashion. It was an independent fashion blog turned into $1 billion digital media and retail powerhouse. I just think it's absolutely incredible. Okay, spoiler alert. Before we get into the top three, they're all in Seoul, okay? They're all from South Korea. And it's often said to see the future, look east. And I just wanted to have a little bit of a sidestep in this presentation to talk about Seoul. And I was fortunate enough to spend a bit of time in Seoul earlier this year, and I will be back next year. I think it's the most electric city in the world for retail right now. If it is not on your list, get it on your list. There's three really interesting things that we're seeing in Seoul. Number one, it is the beauty capital of the world, the new beauty capital of the world, I'd say. Third largest exporting market and fifth largest beauty market in the world. Secondly is luxury retail. I've never seen luxury retail like this in my entire career. It is absolutely gobsmackingly beautiful, and now per capita spend exceeds that of the US. So it's the most prolific and exciting luxury market in the world. And last but not least, couldn't not talk about architecture as an architect, but the architecture is absolutely bonkers. I think the creative innovation, the intellectual bravery, building these great brand temples, I guess, is kind of the message there. And in South Korea, there's a phrase called pali pali. It means quickly, quickly. And I think this is actually a really great way to summarize or kind of capture the sentiment and the ferocious pace of innovation that we're seeing in this city. So I just wanted to show you a couple really cool things that are happening in Seoul. This is Seoul Wasu. This is a Seoul-based skincare brand. This is a 7-level flagship. Treatment rooms and a spa in the basement, rooftop gardens and restaurants, 5 levels of retail. I mean, look at these. They're just, oh my God, they're so beautiful. As you step foot inside, it's just so beautifully executed, curated. Service is just so well done as well. Diptyque, probably one of my favorite brands in the world right now. Again, all these international retailers setting up shop and capitalizing on this amazing momentum that the city is seeing. I think this is one of the best flagships I've actually walked in recent years, but Parisian kind of maison, Diptyque. This is Olive Young. This is their version of Priceline. It's about 1,500 stores in South Korea alone. Again, look at the execution, the quality of design. You could very well be like a Sephora in terms of its execution. Again, just some examples of how that looks and feels. Dior. I mean, this is the House of Dior. Absolutely beautiful. It was opened about, I think, a couple of years ago now, but just gives you a level of the innovation and kind of investment that we're seeing on a global scale. Dior have many stores in Seoul. This is another one. This has been around for about a decade. It's their very famous concrete skirt building. Each of those panels, obviously inspired by a dress, are formed out of off-form concrete, but this is just down the road. Next to that House of Dior is the Gucci Garden building. You can see where I'm going with this. It's just how these luxury brands are using this as a platform to just experiment and do cool shit and just do things differently. The famous Louis Vuitton building that sits adjacent to that, designed by Frank Gehry. And then the Dolce & Gabbana building. I remember when this was built, I thought it was a car park. There's actually no straight level in the store. It consistently ramps up to a rooftop. You can see some of the photos in this slide here as well. Casetify, a phone accessories company. A phone accessories company designing flagships that look like this. Half the store is built out of recycled phone cases. There's cafes, there's restaurants, there's customization labs, there's a rooftop garden. Just absolutely amazing level of innovation. You can see there the rooftop as well. So I hope that just gives you a little flavor of Seoul. We've barely scratched the surface. There's much more to show there, but we'll save that for another day. All right, number 3. There's lots of talk about quiet luxury. It's very kind of topical. This is loud luxury. And we're going to look at fragrance. And I think this brand, what I love about this brand, it's called Born to Stand Out. Mecca have just started stocking this brand, and it is already selling out. And much like the name suggests, it's actually born around a sense of rebellion around cultural and society conformity in South Korea. And the whole proposition is kind of perfume as art. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. But look at how irreverent they are. just the tone of voice. When we think about brand building, it's not just about what the brand does architecturally, it's what it says at the same time. I mean, just look at this, the Mary Jane, just a little pile of weed next to the actual perfume. All the content is just so beautifully done. Their stores, you can imagine, are much the same. This is their first flagship in Seoul. That top left-hand corner is actually the shop front. It's a completely cladded red rammed earth building with a tiny little opening and a corridor that leads you through this kind of gorgeous little maze of product. Again, from a price point perspective, they're about $300 to $400, maybe $500 a pop. So very, very premium in its execution, with a beautiful hand giving customers the finger robotically as they walk through the store. Just really, really thinking quite rebelliously and really leading with a sense of irreverence, I think is kind of the message here. And they've just opened their second store in Seoul. We're going to see a lot more of this brand, I promise you that, and it's just a matter of time before it lands on our shores here in New Zealand and, of course, in Australia. All right, number 2. I think this is the world's greatest storyteller. This is Tambourines. Tambourines is owned by Gentle Monster, which many of you will be familiar with. This is their fragrance and skincare a kind of brand, if you will. So much like its parent company, it's big on storytelling. So much so that they occupy lots next to the actual store itself to put up billboards and actually clear it as a site so people can actually have room to have selfies and photos with the actual content that they create. I think the image with the horse, which is in one of their stores, when attitude becomes fragrance, I think is just a really great kind of saying to kind of capture how they position the brand. Their stores are amazing. They're kind of conceived as these canvases to tell great stories around collections. But the one store I wanted to talk about, remember I showed you that House of Dior before? This sits directly opposite it. This is probably the best store I've walked in recent times. I think there's a lot to unpack here, but they talk about this as the antithesis of the shopfront. In no world would you occupy a building like that, strip out 3 levels of GLA, and actually sink the store into the basement. Said no one ever, right? They use it to tell these amazing stories from an activation perspective on the bottom left-hand corner that bring all their collections to life. I also think it's quite interesting to be walking down a street and to be able to see down onto the top of a store. Very unique, very creative, very different. And they use it, like I mentioned, to tell great stories. The mushroom was for a recent collection called Batari. That mushroom smoked smoke rings in the fragrance and scent itself. You can imagine how energetic and inspiring this is as a place to shop. And then for the release of a lip balm, they had this beautiful elderly couple as wax sculptures applying it to one another, right? Just thinking really differently about things. And I think creating the store as a canvas to tell those stories is kind of the message. All right, number 1. Just to frame up number 1. So Seoul, most energetic, exciting, and electric city in the world right now for retail. This is the fastest growing brand in Seoul. It's called Outer Error. And the way I like to talk about Outer Error is that it's a creative company with a love of creating things. What I mean by that is that it was actually started by an architect, an interior designer, a graphic designer, a chef, and I'm trying to remember the other, I can't remember the other one, but they're all basically creative disciplines. So with this love of creating things, it's a luxury fashion brand, but you look at a board like this. Those bags, by the way, on the bottom left-hand side are real. When you buy a T-shirt from Outer Error, you walk down the street with a bag like that. It's just, again, why? Just really creative. It's beautiful. Building toys, that actually shoot the cup little thing is actually how they retail their socks. When you buy your socks, they come in a little cup and like a coffee little handbag. You can see how they're speaking about themselves, bringing back things like the Tamagotchi. I had one of those when I was a kid. And then through to art, but again, its roots are in fashion. Its collaborations in the past couple of years have been absolutely amazing to see. Bang & Olufsen, Puma, obviously Casetify now venturing into mid-mass market like Zara and Converse. Their stores as well, they occupy buildings that no one wants to touch, and I think are really interesting, office buildings, for instance, or old warehouses. And with this love of creating things, their stores look a little bit like this. You're not really sure what it is, but you like it a lot. And I think just walking through it, there's beautiful fashion, there's installations, it's always changing. These stores are massive. There is no store in their portfolio that's under 2,000 square meters. My favorite one is actually one of the ones in Seoul, which looks a little bit like this. The bottom right-hand corner is actually a corridor on the 5th level of the building. that they make you look for the point of sale. Again, said no one ever. We're going to make it hard for you to transact with us. Come find us. So there's actually a corridor with 10 doors that lead down a corridor. The pause is at the end. In one of the other doors is a restaurant and cafe called Tongue Planet. Again, just the positioning and proposition of this brand. And then when you put it all on a page to look a little bit like this, and the reason this is number one for us, there's no one in the world doing what Outer Era are doing. I think you're going to hear a lot more about them. You're going to see a lot more of them. And yeah, just a really amazing brand. As a bit of a summary, the criteria of cool that we spoke about, it's creative, it's got to have a cult following, and it's got to be commercial. I think just to bring this home now, what are the key themes? What are the takeaways for us? And we talk a lot about these themes with our clients day in, day out across both brand and property development. And these are what we believe the themes to be. First and foremost is stretch. How are we stretching our proposition? How are we stretching the role of our store? How are we stretching the role and life cycle of our assets? It's a very, very powerful term to think about stretch. Value. I think the ultimate rethink around value perception has never been more exciting. I think I've touched on that earlier. I'm going to actually give you a couple examples of each of these as we move through. And then distinction, it was spoken about a bit earlier today. Let's be distinctive. What's your why? We often talk about the rule that I give to my team when we're designing a store or a shopping center is you can't just do a good category job. You have to do a good brand job. What I mean by that is if you took the brand off the building, people will still know who you are. I think you've got to do both. And last but not least, you've got to be ambitious and have a level of courage, I guess, in your execution. So, stretch. These are projects that we've had the great privilege of leading with our clients and designing. This is the Emporium flagship for Rebel Sport with vicinity centers, which you heard from Barnaby earlier. And again, stretching the role of the store, we put a 400 square meter rooftop basketball court in the middle of the CBD that is now a home for amazing activations events. It sits on top of a 3,600 square meter store internally as well. So great activations, partnership with Under Armour, partnership with Nike out of Ohio in the States, just bringing this space to life. We always say a store is only as good as the way it performs. So let's think about what that means. We designed a wine bar, or actually a wine store for an e-commerce wine retailer recently, and just, it's a wine store, that was the brief, but you know what, we're actually going to put a charcuterie bar in there so that you can actually buy your wine as a member, consume it on site, have a beautiful cured meats, cheeses, and it becomes a home for events. This place is absolutely trading its socks off, and I guess a nice bricks and mortar example from an e-commerce retailer. Rethinking value, the work we did with Michael Hill, great Australian iconic retailer through brand, the repositioning of this brand, pure elevation. Sorry? No, that's right, you're right. Sorry about that. Oh, forgive me for that. You want to try that again? An absolute brilliant business, and I think when we thought about, or when we were working with the late Daniel Bracken, of course, how do we actually elevate the business in a number of ways? But I think other than that, it was actually, again, the democratization of those premium experiences, right? The fact that you can have an experience like this, whether you're buying a $100 silver bracelet or a $100,000 necklace. And I think what we also speak about is how the stores become vehicles for us to have either different conversations with our brand partners or to actually allow us to increase ranging or opportunities. And in this case, it was actually leveling up the actual quality and price point of the product to deliver something more premium. Last but not least, leading with distinction. The work that we're doing with Baby Bunting right now is really, really exciting. These stores are trading 38% up. We've delivered 5 out of the 75 already, and the numbers are absolutely bonkers. I think the biggest thing, again, strategically speaking, was it's quite a sleepy category, pardon the pun, the baby retail. And we started with the entire rebrand. We turned this business upside down, shook it about, and put it back together. But it was all about bringing joy and creating an experience synonymous with the emotional investment of having a child. And I think so how that brand came to life, how we think about the stores rather than being category-led, they're activity-led, how it's actually curated and we can kind of create this beautiful contextualization of product through to different kind of categories. And then we've now since taken, these are about 2,000 square meters, we've now taken that into a specialty format at about 400 square meters. So you can see from a distinctiveness in market, no one's really doing anything like this, I guess, in category. But again, if you took the brand off the building, people would still know it's the new Baby Bunting. So I guess in summary, went through a lot very, very quickly. But the common denominator here, and again, the big thing that we talk with both brand and property owners about is we're in this together, and we're in this to build great brands, communities, and worlds. And I think if we can just think about that as kind of the ultimate goal, I think we'll certainly win on all fronts. That's actually a QR code to access the full Top 50 report from the World Retail Congress that you can kind of scan at your leisure, or we'll circulate separately. And thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reid. I think not only do you curate the cool list, you seem to exude cool yourself. I don't know about any of you, but I'm feeling very old and uncool after watching that. One of the questions I thought was really interesting is, what can you take from those very high-end, very big budget fit-outs and apply to a smaller budget?
Great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is we often say there's no silver bullet to delivering great customer experience. What we mean by that, it's actually the sum of the parts that make the difference. And when we think about premium experiences, one of the biggest standouts for us is service. That kind of personalization, that kind of human engagement. We spoke about being relentlessly human earlier. So I think it's about thinking about service for us, first and foremost, is really important. But then I think it's all like the little brand breadcrumbs we talk about, the little 1%. Like for Michael Hill, we designed a little kind of like bespoke fragrance that customers can buy. It's like the little moments that matter, I think, is the thing that luxury retail does so well. Yeah.
What are your current favourite brands in New Zealand, and who would you like to see come here that isn't currently?
That's a big question. That's a big question. I would just say we've really enjoyed working with Rebel Sport here in Briscoe's group. I think that what we're doing with Rebel Sport is going to be really, really transformational and I think really exciting. So I'd say as a Kiwi retailer and working very closely with that business, I think it's just going to be a really exciting future for them. In terms of brands coming here, though, I think maybe just the brands that I had up on screen, I think it's just a matter of time until they're in Australia and in New Zealand, particularly the likes of Kiss. I'd say Palace. They'll probably pop up in concessions initially, but I'd say some of those, I guess, more youthful kind of street culture and apparel brands, I think would be great to see.
Let's just squeak in one final question. There's obviously clear customer appetite for that high design, the trend-driven retail, but with it comes wasteful fit-outs and short life cycles. So how do they reconcile that with sustainability?
That's a great question. I think somebody spoke earlier in the day around longevity. I think that's a big, big piece for us. We have obviously a number of clients that are wanting to be in shopping center developments and ones that are not. But I think the common theme there is that we're designing for longevity. We don't want to be having discussions about renewals or refurbishments or within a 5 to 7 year period. We want to have those kind of investments for the longer term. And I think that's kind of the main place to start, if I'm honest. And that kind of gives us a bit more confidence from a CapEx perspective as well. Yeah.
This final one says, not a question, thanks for taking us on this journey, wow. And I would echo that, so please put your hands together for Reid Nakou. Thank you very much.